We will call the Special Assembly Joint Meeting with Docks and Harbors Board to order for December 18th. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Starting with the Assembly, Ms. Atkinson.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Walakida.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Here.
Mr. Bryson.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Hill.
Here.
And Mayor Weldon.
Here.
A quorum of the Assembly is present. And starting with the Docks and Harbors Board, Chair Etheridge.
Here.
Mr. Ridgway.
Here.
Mr. Suter.
Here.
Mr. Becker, not present. Mr. Grant, not present. Matt, is it Leather? And he's on Zoom, and I'm going to, Leiter, excuse me.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Leiter. Annette Smith. I'm not seeing on Zoom either. And Ms. Hart.
Yes, here.
And a quorum of the Docks and Harbors Board is also present, Madam Mayor.
Glad to hear. Ms. Atkinson, would you give us a land acknowledgement, please?
We would like to acknowledge the city and borough of Juneau as on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Kunishchish.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Since you had practice at the earlier meeting, I figured you'd be good to go. All right, so that brings us to the joint meeting. First of all, thank all of you for coming tonight. We're happy that you serve us well and give us lots of good things coming from you, although I would say members of the public were wild about the increase in rates, but you guys did a lot of work on that, so we appreciate your time and effort on that. So we'll just jump right in. We're trying to maintain it to an hour, but I got secret special permission from the deputy mayor that if we ran a little longer, we'd be okay, but we'll try not to do that. So anyway, so our first topic on the agenda is just introduction. So we'll start with you, Mr. Chair.
I'm Don Etheridge. I've been the chair on the board for quite a while now, and I got another year to go before somebody else gets to have the fun. And it's been a lot of fun being on this board for all this time, and I'm real thrilled with the progresses that we've been making. Thank you.
Singay la ufang. The day is getting good. My name is Wahaginak. The trickiest part of my name is the HL together make a sound. So if you blow the air out the sides of your cheeks, it's a Wahaginak. I am Haida and Tlingit and Otna Athabaskan. My family's from Prince of Wales Island and Chestachina. I am Yak Janas, or Raven from the Shark House. I am into year 3 of my term as an assembly member, and on my day job, I serve as director of the Alaska Native Policy Center.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christine Wall. I think I know almost all of you. I am starting my second term on the assembly. I was the Docks and Harbors liaison maybe about 2 years ago, and just love all the ways that our community can access the water, and I know what you all do is a big part of that, so thank you for that.
My name is Shem Suter. It's my first turn on the Docks and Harbors Board. Got 4 kids, a wife, and pretty happy to be here. Thank you.
Paul Kelly. I'm also starting my first term on the assembly, a couple months into
into the role. But we're looking forward to seeing all of you in future years and working with you. Thank you.
Michelle Hale, Deputy Mayor, and I used to own a boat, and I no longer own a boat. And they say the two happiest days of a boat owner's life are the day they get their boat and the day they don't get their boat. And I've been very happy to not have it in the storms lately, but I love the work that you all do. So thank you.
Katie Kester, city manager, recently appointed. I am originally from Homer, Alaska, which is a port community. My dad's outboard mechanic, so close ties to docks and harbors, and appreciate the work that you do for the economic development in our community.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Carl Uchitel. I'm the port director. I've had this position for 12 years. I've very much enjoyed working with the assembly and the community in advancing the needs of the waterfront. Prior to taking the job, I had a 27-year career in the Coast Guard.
I'm Ella Atkinson, my first term as Assembly member and also the Docks and Harbors liaison. So it's good to see you all here today, and I'm looking forward to this meeting.
Greg Smith, second year of my second term. Nice to meet some of you that I haven't met before. I guess we both probably met during appointments and things, but thanks for your work.
Hi, Alicia Hughes Candies. I've been on the Assembly for the last 5-ish years, I believe, and I was a liaison back in the day, but probably been away from Docks and Harbors meetings for too long, and we'll have to rectify that. Come hang out with you guys. Ms. Hale reminded me that I spent a year living in Harris Harbor when I first moved back to town, so appreciate very much the work you do for the docks and the harbors.
Good evening. My name is Mark Ridgway. I'm in my second term serving at the Assembly's pleasure on Docks and Harbors. Avid boater, work for the Coast Guard. And nice to be here tonight. Thank you.
Wade Bryson. I'm in my second year of my second term on the Assembly. I was Docks and Harbors liaison last year, and it was a lot of fun. I learned all kinds of neat things. So thank you guys for coming and joining us this evening.
Great. Good evening, everybody. My name is Debbie Hart. I'm just finished up the first year of my first term on the Docks and Harbors Board, and I've learned a tremendous amount. My first year, I tried to just listen. I wasn't a rebel rouser, but you guys know some of the other hearts in town. I have to disclose that Carla is my sister-in-law. And she's very active, and I always appreciate the things that she says and does, but I don't always agree. But I love her so much. Chris Hart is my brother-in-law, and he's also a rebel rouser, but in a really good way. He owns Western Marine Construction, and they often do a lot of really good harbor jobs around town. I came to Juneau when I was 11. My dad worked for the Forest Service, so I moved up from Colorado. And I went to high school here, went away to college, came back. I had a 20-year career with Fish and Game. I was just about everything at Fish and Game. I started as a tech, and I ended my career as a fisheries manager, as a supervisor for the marine section. I have a lot of boating experience. I've fished commercially. Love that. My husband is an amazing commercial fisherman, and had a chance to fish with him and my 2 daughters. They're both fishermen as well. And currently, I'm the coordinator for the Southeast Alaska Fish Habitat Partnership. So I get to work with communities all over Southeast and even statewide at times. So marine resources and all the infrastructure is something I'm very keenly interested in, not only because I'm a user, but because it's the lifeline to our communities. I'm also a harbor user. I have an office on a beautiful float house in Aurora Harbor. And I'm really appreciative to all the Docks and Harbor staff. I think that they often don't get enough kudos for a lot of the work they're doing. They're keeping people safe, and they're providing some really incredible infrastructure for all of us to use. So thank you for the long introduction.
Thank you. Mr. Leiter?
Hey, thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. My name is Matt Leiter. I've been in Juneau for 5 years, and I've lived on a boat in Statter Harbor for about 4 of those years. And love sailing, love being out on the water. This is my 2nd year that I just finished on my first term in the Harbor Board and Docks and Harbors Board. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for everybody who's coming together tonight.
Thank you. You all know me, I'm the mayor. But what you may not know is I grew up with commercial fishing and had my own boat for 7 years. And I traded in the slow boat for a very, very fast boat that we launch in and out of Douglas. So anyway, with that, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody. And we're going to dive right in, and I'll go to you. I think, Ms. Kester, are you starting this next item? Yes, roles and responsibility of the tourism manager and the Docks and Harbors Board. So as everybody knows, we, from the Visitor Industry Task Force, we came up, one of their recommendations was to hire a tourism manager, which we have, Alex Pierce. And with that, I'll send it to you, Katie. Or excuse me, Ms. Kester. Just called you Katie earlier. So.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I just want to briefly kind of frame the conversation that I know staff is hoping that this joint group can have regarding the roles of tourism, the tourism manager, and the roles of the Docks and Harbor Board. Respectively, each body has, over the last year or so, kind of talked around this question. I know that the Assembly at the Committee of the Whole in November of 2022, and then again July of this year, talked about the role that the Assembly wants to have the Docks and Harbors Board in play in tourism policy. And the kind of direction that staff has gotten is that we hired a tourism manager to manage the impacts of tourism, the impacts of the visitors that visit our docks, and that policy direction needs to come through the tourism manager and the city manager's office. Those conversations were also had at the Docks and Harbor Board meetings with City Manager Watt, and he threw in front of you guys some ideas on what that could logistically look like. Changes to Title 85, which is Waters and Harbors, changes to Title 3, which is Administration, where the manager's office sits. And I think the conversation would really benefit from the board being able to ask your questions of the Assembly, and the Assembly being able to give the board direction. So that's why the question in this memo, I didn't include any of the drafts that have been back and forth, or I really tried to keep this packet from getting the body into the weeds, because I think there's a tremendous amount of weeds. So that's why your packet is relatively light. But really wanted to offer up this question to the group. Does the Assembly want Docks and Harbors to be involved in dock policy as it relates to the visitor industry? So I will just tee it up and hand it back over to the mayor.
I usually don't turn off my mic. Thank you. So a different kind of title, but we're really just talking about the docks at this point. Your work on the harbors is very much appreciated. We don't want anything to do with the harbors. Thank you very much. So continue doing what you're doing. And so we're just talking about the docks. So who wants to chime in? Ms. Hale.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that as we've talked about this, as former city manager, Mr. Watt, brought this up, the sort of the burning question, I think for the Assembly, certainly for me, is what happens a lot when Docks and Harbors Board or the port director make decisions about docks and cruise ships and cruise ship tourism. We get the fallout. So we don't make the decisions, but we get the political fallout. And it's a very political issue, obviously, in this town. And so what I'm really looking for is a way of parsing things out so that the decisions that are made, like, let's just say the 16B docks, for example, right? The decisions that are made are Assembly decisions when we are actually trying to decide the future of tourism and what happens with tourism in Juneau as it relates to the large cruise ship docks. So that's my driving force. Could add to that. I mean, no criticism of anybody. You guys are doing your job. You're doing a great job. But that's just sort of the way, Docks and Harbors Board, most of the people on the Docks and Harbors Board are harbor users. They're not dock users. And so they're very focused on the harbors. And then, as I said, we get the follow-up from the dock decisions.
Right. And Port Director, you could tell, and Chair Etheridge and I and Rory talked before he left about some of this too, and it's mainly just to do with the dock policy. So that would encapsulate rates, capital projects, and anything to do with policy in general. Scheduling, you hear Ms. Pierce talk about scheduling, and hopefully we put you guys somewhat at ease by saying we're not interested in operations, maintenance, and or the revenue. We're not looking at doing anything with the revenue. You guys are still in charge of that, so hopefully that will get some more people to chime in. Mr. Ridgway. I know too many of you too well.
I thought she was calling you Mike there for a minute. And examples would really be helpful. When the Title 85 changes came first before us, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? What's trying to be accomplished? What's trying to get fixed? Then I came to a couple meetings with the tourism manager, and that was very helpful. I came to the committee of the whole meeting when you did the very unique, which is it a thumbs up or thumbs down? Was very surprised to hear that there were, the majority of the folks were saying, okay, let's tamp it down. And then I immediately began to think, okay, well, how does that affect us? When I think of the docks and harbors operations, and I understand that the harbors you don't want to touch, but of course, a lot of those decisions, 16B, of course, did come before the assembly because it was $52 million. But I think of our day-to-day operations, hey, we made a decision to do a beautiful job building out Statter Harbor because there was a need for whale, for boats, for whale watching. So there's that extension part of it. But two, when it gets straight up to the docks policy, other than the rate, which we just spent 3 years trying to make appropriate, I cannot honestly think of a policy which we control, which other than committing funds to deferred maintenance or rails, which aren't going to happen, but I see the small decisions. We needed the last facility we built per Coast Guard increased regulations, so we built that. But I don't see any real policy that we're doing, so I'm just trying to feel that out if that's okay to discuss. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Let me take a stab at it, and then Ms. Hale will go. So it's probably more anticipated of things ahead, like when Norwegian Cruise Line looked at building a dock. We immediately said, that's our baby. We're going to deal with that. And as Ms. Pierce gets more into the scheduling, she's going to bring those to us rather than to you, because we are going to be the ones working at tampering down rather than you. So hopefully that helps. And Ms. Hale, you want to chime in? And Alicia, was that a hand?
Yeah, the scheduling is a really good example. So up until very recently, we haven't had any control over the schedules. So we're the ones that hear when downtown has an enormous number of people on one day. And so that's one of the things that's been really important, and working with the tourism manager to actually get control of that schedule. I know that the Docks and Harbors Board doesn't make the schedule, but that we're trying to claw that back so that that's in our control. So we actually can make decisions about, and it's all very long range, and we don't know exactly how it's going to go. And, we've talked about what to do exactly with tourism, but if there are things that we can do to moderate that schedule, that's something that we might be interested. Whale watching is another really good example. So, the Statter Harbor improvements are really great, and we have a whale watching problem in Juneau right now. So the NOAA whale expert came and said, nowhere in the world are there so many people watching so few whales. So and it's worrisome, and so we hear a lot about that. And so that's an area where, and obviously that's not a dock issue, but those are two policy areas that, and the third one that the mayor mentioned, that are really important for us to be able to make sure we have the ability to affect, so that we can respond to our citizenry.
All right, Ms. Hughes Candies, and then you were just playing with the mic, but Ms. Wall.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think just to add to the conversation, just the way I'm thinking about it, I agree when you don't have examples, then, and we're not looking at something concrete here, we're just having a conversation. Just my attempt to chime in where I'm coming from philosophically. I think when I think of the sort of what Docks and Harbors Board is setting out to do, you're trying to run a good operation at the docks, you're trying to run a good operation at the harbors. You got to be thinking about the future financial needs of both enterprises, and someone said rates, but you've got to be planning for that and making sure that you have the funds to do that. That in some ways completely just in a different universe than looking at a broader universe and saying the citizenry maybe doesn't like the effects of tourism, or maybe we need to manage the effects of tourism a little bit differently. We might be running into a situation where those two things are in conflict. So the way I see it is just cleaning up the toolbox so that the Assembly has more clear-cut tools to manage some of those things like whale watching, or if we wanted to reduce numbers, that would be kind of, I would think, if I'm a Docks and Harbors Board person, counterintuitive to having enough money to manage the enterprise. So having those two things be in conflict would be one reason why we maybe want to have more tools at our disposal. And I agree, it's not a criticism as to how anything's being run. It's just two different lenses of how to approach the enterprise, and wanting there to be real clarity that the Assembly has the tools that it wants at its disposal is cleaned up well in our code and our procedure.
Well, thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Ms. Hart.
Thanks, and I really appreciate having this conversation. It has been interesting to be reviewing Title 85 and then the proposed changes that the previous city manager was recommending. And again, I'm still pretty new to Docks and Harbors, so I'm still kind of learning things. But my understanding is that we serve at the will of the Assembly, and really all of our decisions always come back to the Assembly, and some of them quicker than others. We serve the role of providing the public an opportunity to come and share their issues, whatever they might be, for either harbors or docks. And when I saw the proposed changes in 85, I guess I was a little alarmed, because I thought, this seems interesting to potentially want to take away this opportunity that the Docks and Harbors provides our community to talk about harbors and docks in this forum. And again, Assembly always has that, the buck stops with them, but we're providing this service, and it seems like it's a really important process. And so I guess I would just really like to hear from Assembly members if they feel that these, and I'm not exactly sure what is being proposed anymore, if those changes are still being proposed or not. I didn't see that in tonight's packet. But one way I've also been looking at it is I used to serve on the Eagle Crest board, similar enterprise board. And I thought, it almost seems like changes to Title 85, or if we were the Eagle Crest board, it would be like you're wanting to take the gondola and all of a sudden make the gondola under the purview of us, not kind of excluding the Eagle Crest manager and the board. It's kind of like you're taking it sort of out from under them, and it just seemed confusing to me to be doing something like that with Docks and Harbors. I feel like you're making a mistake maybe, and you might not know it, because I think you're still going to get those irate calls, because tourism is just a really complicated subject here, and our community is passionate. And I had suggested that we form a subcommittee on the Docks and Harbors to talk about docks and ways that we can make docks more enjoyable for our community. And we haven't met as a subcommittee because we've been kind of waiting for more direction from you all. But it seems like, you know, I guess I'm asking two things of the assembly. One is, are you thinking about the process? And maybe we can clarify what it is you're wanting to change. And then are you thinking through that process, and are you potentially maybe giving yourself a bigger headache? That's one. And then second is, I think having some kind of like that you're doing with the tourism working group, but more specific, a more specific committee, maybe the assembly forms a subcommittee, and they talk about the docks, and they talk about, you know, with the tourism groups and with the community and with kids. I mean, people miss the lightering float. People want to use the downtown harbor, and those big docks kind of prevent that now. But it doesn't have to always be that way. There's a lot of infrastructure funding out there right now. My day job is very involved with the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. And there's a lot of different grants. We could be working hard to chase some really neat things that would benefit our community. So sorry, those two things, and I'm open to others want to respond to them or however you feel, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you for your comments. Just kind of give you an example, the dock rates are just a perfect example that I can see, and this isn't a debate tonight, just so you know. I don't want to get into a debate back and forth, but you guys went and tried to do equal across the board, not knowing that Ms. Pierce is trying to equalize the docks across the board between public and private. So it's just an example of, we were aware of that, you guys weren't aware of that, and we just feel that it's in our bailiwick. And as far as a subcommittee, I think all the assembly wants their fingers on the dock issues and not just parts of us. So with that, next we have Ms. Wall and then Chair Etheridge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Hart really, I think, started to answer my question, but I'm definitely interested in other Docks and Harbors board members' thoughts. You know, I'm struggling with understanding. I generally agree with other things assembly members have said about the types of decisions that the assembly wants to, be the ones directing. So what I want to be able to hear from Docks and Harbors tonight is, what are they losing in their opinion based on the changes that they saw? So that's what I'm curious about, and maybe the assembly needs to, figure out whether these exact changes that we saw a few months ago are still the ones we're looking to, but definitely interested in that high level reaction.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wall. And I can answer that. The Title 85 was what Mr. Watt had proposed a while ago, but since then we've had many discussions, and we just haven't put the whole feeling of a dock policy into writing per se. We're going to make Ms. Kester to take a stab at that. So those were proposed things, but that's not what we're pushing right now. Mr. Etheridge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think one of the biggest things that put us on guard over this is the way it came out. It came out and we had no idea that it was coming until we got hit with it. And that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we've had all the way along. And we've been asking for communications between the Assembly and the Docks and Harbors Board, and we want direction, and we're willing to go in the direction that you want to go in. And that's what we've been lacking, we feel, is the direction that the Assembly wants to see things. When you talked about the new dock that wants to be built there, we had no problem when you guys took over that. I felt blessed that you took that over. I'm sure you did. And we're just, our biggest thing is we're looking for directions of where you want to go. We put in, before we did the across the board increase, we put in for the $2 or double the cruise ship fee, and we got nowhere with that one. It didn't happen. So we don't know what you wanted. That's what our concern was. We didn't know which direction. So well, this is the direction we're going in with everything else, so we go with that direction for right now. And I just wish we could have more communication as what you're looking for, and then we'd know which way to go, instead of sitting here and all of a sudden you're doing things all wrong, and we thought we were doing right to start with, so. Thank you.
No one's saying you were doing things all wrong, but you're leading into our next agenda topics. But one of the things we just have to remember, and I'll bring it back up, is we now have a tourism manager, and how does that position fit into the picture? And remember, the tourism manager reports to Ms. Kester, who directly reports to us. So we have a little bit more of a streamlined effect than you guys, because you don't have direct connection to us. Next I had Mr. Bryson, and I think I saw another hand on this side. Mr. Ridgway.
Madam Mayor, thank you, because that was a perfect segue into what I was talking about. What I've discovered from Docks and Harbors is that we have Docks and Harbor experts. Listening to your presentations and the information that they're going through, these guys know Docks and Harbors like nobody's business. We have experts, and I feel blessed that they're doing this. We're in a different time period right now, though, and we talked about the Visitor Industry Task Force. This is kind of one of the outcomes of the Visitor Industry Task Force. I was a member of it. It ended right as the pandemic started rolling on. We covered every single one of these topics that have just been briefly mentioned tonight. We talked about them at length. We had Coast Guard, we had NOAA, we talked about whales. We saw that problem even then. So I see Ms. Pierce's position in the way that the Assembly's kind of got it. It's just how we're slowly putting into place the effects of the Visitor Industry Task Force. Next year will be the first year that they have the voluntary 5-ship limit. And it's taken that many years after they agreed to it, to get to scheduling. I think Ms. Hughes-Candies hit the nail on the head. We're using our tourism director as another tool to help manage tourism in Juneau. I wanted to be the last person to say we need to do something about it. I've had different opinions prior to this point, but I know that the community was really pressured this year, and so it's a responsible thing for us to look at it and say, what do we need to do to manage this? Maybe that's the one thing that we can relieve the feeling of the sentiment from Docks and Harbors, is that Madam Mayor hit the nail on the head. We're taking more responsibility for what's going to happen between the cruise industry and the docks in Juneau over the next few years. And so if we weren't in this time frame, if we weren't trying to solve that problem, I don't know that we would take this on, Madam Mayor. But we're in a thing that is changing the face of the community. And so I'm supportive of this, where I might not have initially, because I felt kind of the same way you guys. I didn't completely understand the first time Mr. Watt explained it to me, and now I do see it as another tool that the Assembly is using to make sure that we are actively responding to the community's requests that we actively manage tourism. And so I want to thank Docks and Harbor, because everything I ever saw from you guys was like at the highest level of professionalism. And like they talk about even like 2 feet versus 4 feet on the spaces of a dock. I mean, they go that deep into the level. So we're just taking more responsibility on this topic right here is what I think it really boils down to. Thank you for the time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Mr. Ridgway.
Madam Mayor, more power to you. Yeah, we're absolutely okay with that. I think we have 3 buckets of things that we deal with. None of them are scheduling, but we deal with project prioritization, recapitalization, maintenance, whatever. Wow, totally lost my train of thought. We have to manage the port director, who I don't always get along with, Mr. Yucatil, but the city is incredibly lucky to have such a high-functioning professional as a port director, as well as the rest of the staff. I'm not sure if all of you know, but our harbor master is Harbor Master of the Year of the entire state. That's just kind of par for the course. of the staff that he's built over the years. And I think as you develop the new tool in the tool bag, we just want to make sure we're utilizing, because it's going to affect us. So we do projects, right? We direct operation resources, like we had to increase our operational staff for docks in the last couple of years, due mostly in part to Coast Guard regulations. We try and manage Carl. So if we can maybe put this in manageable buckets as to how this policy might affect us, that, maybe make it into more bite-sized pieces. I think this is great, and we very much appreciate it, because as Chair Etheridge said, we were like, whoa, Rory, what did we do wrong? And I think we're all, I not to speak for the whole board, but I think we're getting an idea of like, okay, we didn't do something wrong, new position. I do think at the end of the day, we owe it to Mr. Yucatil because we're telling him that he's going to have two bosses, essentially, tourism director and our board. If I'm, or the assembly, I'm not really quite sure, but I'd really like to do our job for the assembly as directly as possible, if that makes any sense. But I would humbly suggest we consider the buckets of things that the board deals with: facilities, staff, prioritization. That's really it. We made a decision that Statter was very important, because I still think building out those docks were. We needed the building on the docks, for the security on the dock. We funded that, and we got it built. Oh, I'm sorry, the third one, I was stalling, is rate setting. So there I see a nexus where obviously we were trying to do the 9% across the board. There's a lot of debate about that, very painful, suffering, but we got through it. I understand that the assembly would like to get into that rate setting thing. So if we put these three buckets together, I don't know that your policy is going to, the revised 85, but we as a board, if we have anything that goes in that bucket for docks, we can come up with a mechanism to let you guys know, hey, do you want to deal with this? Just like Chair Etheridge recalled with Norwegian. When you guys took that over and said we don't have to deal with it, we all went, we were very happy. It's just a suggestion, maybe put it into some bite-sized pieces, and then come and enact your Title 85 changes for the clarity, because I think it does provide it, and then provide us a mechanism maybe for making sure that we don't, that Manager Kester and our tourism director get the stuff that's now being directed into their swim lane appropriately. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for your comments, and you're actually bringing us into the next topic, unless somebody has something to say about our first topic. Ms. Hale.
Just one more thing, and it really gets to what Chair Etheridge was talking about, that this kind of hit like a ton of bricks or something like that. This all of a sudden, where did this come from, right? And we've heard this from other empowered boards, that sometimes there's communication is difficult. The boards hire people. Mr. Yucatil reports to the board, Docks and Harbors Board, and not to the assembly. And so a lot of times there are some difficulties in communication. I would encourage us all to talk to each other. So if there are board members, people that on the assembly, please talk to us. And, we have liaisons to the boards, but that's a really tall order for the liaison to make sure that the communication is happening between the assembly. So talk to your assembly members, talk to our city manager, Mr. Etheridge, Mr. Yucatil. So I think communication is really important.
Okay, we're moving into item 3, but Mr. Leiter, did you want to talk about item 2 still?
Just briefly, if that's okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just adding to one of the things that I was hoping we'd have a little more clarity on, or one of the concerns that was brought about by this introduction of Title 85 changes. The thing I was concerned about was we were asked to maintain the docks and, staff the docks and make sure that they're functional for the tourists in the summer. But at least in the initial read that I had, it looked like we were being relieved of our ability to assess fees that are appropriate to do that. And so it made me concerned that we're being asked to do something, but we can't control, or at least that was the initial proposal as I understood it, that we're not able to control how much money we're able to generate in order to make that happen. I think it's really reasonable again, I don't want to be a part of the politics, just like many people have said here. I think assessing whatever fee that the Assembly feels is appropriate for marine passenger fee is the way to accomplish that. And then the general moorage rates, dockage rates are the way that we accomplish our goal. But I think taking docks and harbors out of the fee, at least for the dockage rates, it scares me that we don't have control over that, although we're being told to maintain and to manage. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. One of the things, so those are some of the things we're going to have to communicate about. So, and I don't know if you know, Ms. Pearson, we won't make you come down, is basically trying to get the right ship at the right dock. And one of the mechanisms she's trying to do that is to increase our harbor rates, our dock rates. I don't want anybody here harbor, our dock rates to match closer to the private rate. So if anything, you're going to have more money than what you anticipated before. But that will be something that you guys will have to weigh in on and let us know. We were trying to do this project, although capital projects are probably going to be something that we have a finger on. And then we can talk about whether you need more money, but I think you're actually going to get more money. The toughest thing on communications that I see is going to fall on Mr. Yucatel, I'll be honest. Because we don't want to take him away from you guys, but he will have to look at things that come before you guys as docs and decide whether it's policy or not. And if it's policy, he needs to be talking with Mrs. Kester and say, you guys, this is something you guys want to do or something we want to do. So that's the question that probably to the group now is, how do we make communication better? So there's going to be confusion. I'm not denying that, but how do we make it better so there's not quite so much confusion. We're sorry that we caught you by surprise, but actually in our comments in the past years at the Assembly, which is very tail end of the meeting, there was some talk about maybe we should be more involved in dock policy, and we just didn't get that message to you. So that's our fault. And we shouldn't have done it quite in the way we were. So, Mr. Eathers, you want to chime in on this? What's your thoughts on communication?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is one of the greatest communications that we do have. And I try to reach out I've reached out to you several times as you have to me. And I think we need to be able to do more than that, is with reaching out to everybody. And if you've got something that you think we're doing wrong, let us know. If you see some kind of change you think we need, talk to us. We're willing to take whatever steps we need to make things happen. I know that there was a lot of squawk to the Assembly over the rate increases, but we did that over a 3-year period. The 3 years we worked at getting the rate increase, and then 3 years of doing the increase. So we've tried to spread it out as much as we could and make it easier. But when you're we've got people telling us we should be back to the same rates we charged in the 70s. Well, the state built all the docks and maintained them. We didn't. Well, we got to be able to do that now. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have, is that we get a lot of comments from the public that are contrary to what today's harbors are anymore. And so we got to be able to communicate back and forth to let you guys know that we're doing this and this is why, and that's what we were trying to do with the rate increases and so forth. And we get a little antsy when we do something like the rate increase and you get a split vote on it, and after you've worked on it for 3 years, it's kind of what do we do? So thank you.
Not an easy task, but just for the record, I get lots of split votes on my ideas too. But I actually think that was a good example of something that you guys did very, very well. You went out and did a rate study. You came forward. You got lots of public input. Most of it was interesting. And then you brought it before the assembly, and we got the same public input too. And I think that's really good that you brought up these docks were state, these harbors, I should say, and docks were state, and then the state gave them to us. Here you go. The maintenance is all yours now, and we have to figure out a way to, and that's why I think the body supported you ultimately is now we have to take care of them. I mean, it's very similar with our utility rates. Now we have to take care of these things. So any other comments? Ms. Wall.
Well, first I'll point out that no one on this body voted against the rate increases. A few of us wanted one more meeting, but I'm just thinking that it may be helpful for the assembly to have a conversation. I know we've had this in the past, but we've had new members about kind of the role of our liaisons, and I'm not suggesting that this should or shouldn't be the liaison's job to kind of help massage the tensions between boards, but I think when I've been a liaison, I've never been sure whether the expectation of my fellow assembly members and of staff is that I'm just telling Docks and Harbors what's going on at the assembly and then telling the assembly what's going on at Docks or Harbors, or whether there's a greater obligation for me to be spotting these issues in advance, helping kind of prepare for them. So that might be a conversation we can have about all of our boards and what we think those expectations on the liaisons are.
Well put, Ms. Wall, and if your liaisons, especially Docks and Harbor Board, if they're dealing with something, certainly let me know or Ms. Kester know, so we're aware of it, and then we can chat about it too, so, or invite them to come talk to us and let us know what's going on. Mr. Ridgway.
Madam Mayor, so this is extremely helpful. If there is, from the Assembly's perspective, again, facilities, rates, personnel, those are, that's 85% of the stuff we're dealing with. If one of those buckets is more important, that would probably be helpful. And on a side note, even though I don't like analogies, I have a 6.0, I have a 6.4, I have a 7.3 liter diesel engine. And when beautiful Ford engines, you lift up that hood and you think you're gonna fix it, and it's so complex, I don't even touch it. Arguably, the city of Juneau has got the best harbors in the state, the most visited harbors in the state. We have incredibly professional staff. We just as a side note, and what's helpful of this meeting is understanding why you guys have to do this. So as you lift that hood up and you're going to use your tool bag, please just err on the side of caution before turning a wrench too hard on things. I would just ask that as a board member who's dedicated several years to making it work. But if those three buckets, if splitting it up into rates, facilities, or personnel, staffing, operations, if one of those is more important to you guys, please let us know. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments, well said. Look around, Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm not fully sure how to comment on this. I need more details if I'm saying you should do it or we should do it. I just need more details. I can't answer the question in the thing. Maybe we've moved on from that, which is actually fine by me. I guess
Communications, Mr. Smith.
Yes, it is. I think some nice, clear communication, regarding the rates. I have my personal perspective, and that's I'd like to see rates. Anyway, I'm very conscientious of resident fishermen and the liveaboard people. I don't want to get into should we change the mooring rate? That's where so do we need to do with communication votes by the full assembly, providing some policy and strategic direction? Would that be helpful? I don't want to deal with the rates, I'll tell you that, but I have things in the rates principles that I support. But do you need, is that the type of thing that would be more helpful? Or, because I could talk to all of you all day, but that's just me as Greg, not as the assembly, so.
Okay, I'll try to get to the gist of your question. If your harbor rates talk to them. If it's dock rates, then I would say Ms. Pierce is gonna have the reins on that one, and she's gonna come to the body and say, these are what I'm proposing, and go from there. But we don't want to get in the minutia either of the dock rates or the harbor rates, in my opinion.
I guess I'm just trying to say, do we need to provide more clear strategic or like higher level direction to docks and harbors? And that could help them operate, I guess, in a little more, with a little more clarity. I guess I'm just like, the rates being an issue. I mean, again, I also don't want to like get deep into like planning out your CIP stuff on the docks, like not my area of expertise, but I guess I need a list of something or what we want to do or what we're trying to figure out here. I'm not sure what we're totally doing. So anyway.
I'm trying to come up with your question. So again, the dock rates are probably going to kind of fall under the purview of Ms. Pierce. If you're talking about general direction to the harbor rates, to the Docks and Harbors Board, this certainly would be the time if you had some thoughts about it, but I don't know, the will of the body has been temperature checked on this, but okay, Ms. Hughes Candies, we'll let Mr. Smith think on that.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. While a second ago you said communication, so this is going to be higher level comments, but it maybe gets to something that Mr. Smith was just saying, which is it is great when we are all talking to each other all the time. We also all know that all the Docks and Harbors Board people have lives, and they're choosing to go to these meetings in addition to that. And we're very familiar with how many meetings we have in addition to our liaison duties. If we are not, if I'm calling someone, I, Alicia, have my 2 cents, but that may not be the same as the will of the body of the assembly. So that's not particularly helpful, except then they know if I'm a particular thorn in Carl's side, and I keep telling Port Director Yucatel that, I really hope they don't do this. And he'll say, well, I know that she's going to bring that up when I bring it to the assembly. It gives some sense. But I don't want to be a naysayer. I think meetings like this, where we can provide more clear policy, is probably the best, because maybe we save. When we are clear and we do give a clear temperature, then we save our empowered board's time. But we are also all aware of the fact that it's hard for us to even schedule these meetings. So maybe it's more discipline about having the assembly working amongst themselves to provide clearer policy direction to our empowered board, so they don't waste time going in a direction that we're not going to support. And they know where we're coming from. But I think really beyond the specifics of potential changes and how that will require clarity, it really requires full body-to-body communication, because and good staff communication. But with lacking that, then any one of us can go haywire and and make all kinds of hijinks on the night. So.
Right. And I thank you, Ms. Hughes. I think I understand Mr. Smith, where he's coming from a little bit from after you talked. So I would say to the board, if you want high policy direction on anything, i.e. harbor rates, then that's something that you should come to us with before you spend a lot of time working. I think that's kind of what you're getting on it, because it's hard for us, well, nor do we want to give you policy direction if you're not dealing with that policy. So anyway, we have Mr. Suter and then Ms. Hale. Were you next? Were you in there? Okay, and then Ms. Wall. Mr. Suter.
If you're going to rewrite 85, would it be appropriate to maybe say we meet with you guys annually or biannually?
We could put that in there, but we try and do that at least once a year, if not twice, too.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but we can certainly do that. Ms. Kester's down there taking notes, so I've Ms. Hale and then Ms. Wall and Looking around, I don't see the hands yet, so Ms. Hale.
Thank you. I think that relative to some of what Mr. Smith was saying, I think there might be some polar opposites in terms of assembly opinion on setting rates for different types of harbor users. And so that's not an easy thing for the assembly to come to agreement on necessarily. I also just want to remind us all that this assembly has tended to go into the weeds on a lot of issues, and we only have so much bandwidth, and that's actually why we have empowered boards. You have to go into the weeds on setting the rates, and then it's our duty to say yes or no, and I'm really, really glad we said yes on the rates you set. And I will remind you all that you came to us with those rates years ago, and we said, no, we need to see more reasoning behind it. And so we actually did give direction, and you guys totally did that. So that was actually, I mean, it was painful, I think, for the harbor board, and I know it was because I listened to the meeting after we said no. There were some people that were pretty hot, but you really did, you took that direction. I think that just on a large, sort of a big picture thing, someday I would like to have a joint harbor board assembly meeting talking about liveaboards, because I know there are people that like the idea of liveaboards as a pressure relief valve, and rents can be low, but that's incredibly expensive for society to be providing those low rents. And so, you know, we have to come to some agreement, because building harbors is really expensive, and the original intent was not for liveaboards, even though they do provide a great place to live and a great pressure relief. So something that would be good to talk about someday.
Okay, Mr. Chair, you have put that on your agenda. I'm just giving us a little bit. It's almost 7 and we still have 2 items, but right now I have Ms. Wall and then we'll hug it off. Ms. Wall.
Thanks. I'll try to keep this short. I just think the harbor fee increases are a perfect example of how, you know, we could have done this better collectively as a group. I think I was liaison when you all started the study, and in the back of my mind, I was like, man, it's going to get rough if they go through a 3-year process and then they want to raise rates on fishermen and liveaboards, because that's something that the assembly generally supports. And so I was young in my assembly career, but I should have been like, now is the right time to have that conversation for the assembly to say, hey, we know you all have to raise rates. It's time to raise rates. There are some user groups that if we collectively agree as an assembly, believe to meet our community goals, we need to support. And then you all could have, you know, taken that into consideration as you went forward, instead of getting to the final vote and the assembly being like, but wait, we're not quite. So we can all collectively know what are those big things that are eventually going to be coming to the assembly, and maybe controversial if the assembly isn't brought in early.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. We'll hug it up.
Yeah, thank you. Sitting here. By the way, I've requested to be the liaison for Docks and Harbors 2 years in a row and haven't got it yet.
You can't have everything you want.
I want everything I want. But, you know, in trying to think through the questions that you're asking, Madam Mayor, and thinking through, you know, what you were raising, Mr. Smith, you know, I was thinking about, I do sit on another board, and we're in a kind of a similar situation where, you know, the strategy at the top level hasn't really been formulated in a way that's clear to everybody involved. And so every decision being made is kind of piecemealed here and there. And we don't know if we're all falling under the same, you know, thought process of what that strategy should be. And then thinking through the communications piece, you know, we do have other bodies that have a liaison that comes and sits with us, and then we are, as the liaisons, go sit with them. And so as a thought process, maybe that's another option that we can consider and think about. But I am kind of teetering with what I think Mr. Smith was getting at in terms of that kind of overarching thought process. And I've heard a few of you say that in terms of, you know, what is our intention, what is our goals, and what is the will of this body to try and to set that so that we know that we're going in the same direction.
Thank you, Algodoc. And now we'll go to Mr. Etheridge so he can speak on this and then take us to the next topic.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a lot of information I've heard here tonight, and I like a lot of communication between us, and I think it's a great thing. And I hope we can keep it up. When we set rates, we have a policy in docks and harbors that it has to be fair to everybody. That's a policy that we've established. So we can't start picking up, but we do break where we can, and it's hard to do that. But we can't please everybody all the time. We have the same problem you do. Somebody's going to be mad at us all the time. So that's one of the things that we have to be able to communicate about. We have to be able to run our operation and run it fairly and keep it moving. And we keep falling behind a little bit on some of our upkeep, so we got to try to get caught up with some of that. And that's one of the things that we are trying to communicate to you guys, is that we got to have these increases in order to take care of our facilities. And if we can't communicate that to you, then we're going to be in a world of hurt. So thank you. The project update from the port director, Mr. Yucatel.
Thank you, Chair Etheridge. Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Thank you, Assembly. So I'll be quick. I will talk as long as you let me talk about projects, but I know that there's a couple updates that the Mayor specifically asked. First of all, Aurora Phase 3, which is the next phase of Aurora build out. That project was awarded to Tricano for $4.2 million in April. He will mobilize on Wednesday this week to start bringing the floats in, hopefully driving piles by the end of the week. So that's one. That particular project is 3 times the per square foot cost that we paid in 2018 for the first phase or the second phase of Aurora Harbor. So numbers went up almost exponentially for harbor construction. The good news with the Aurora Phase 4, which hopefully will be the next and last phase, we have $5 million that was allocated through the 1% sales tax initiative of 2022. Thank you very much, Assembly, for that support. So we have that in the pocket. We have applied for a harbor grant. So everything we do with docks and harbors, it may not be our favorite project, but we pursue projects that have the best chance of being funded. Aurora Harbor has always been a top project of the board. So assuming we get the $5 million from the state DOT with their municipal harbor grant program, and the governor signs it in July, we could go out for a bid as early as next summer for the last phase. So the good news on Phase 4, there's only one project submitted to DOT for a harbor grant this year. So that's good, that there's no competition. The bad news is, will the legislature look at something as a kind of an earmark for Juneau and may pass on it. So we've had we've always gotten harbor grants. We just wait patiently for our ship to come in to move forward. But if everything lines up, we'll as early as next fall, we'll be working to finish it off. So that was one project that the mayor asked specifically. The next project that was asked for an update is North Douglas. So 3 years ago, we've had ideas to expand North Douglas launch ramp. Basically, I've had communications with Kensington Mine. They have excess waste rock. There could be an opportunity to build something out there at the $20 million price tag, nothing cheap. So if you've been there, there's probably room for about 12 truck and trailers, heavily used. The water is very deep there. The challenges that we'll have with any type of development, so right now we just have a concept, a plan, and a rough order of magnitude estimate. And the issues we have to resolve would be all that parking is in the state right of way. So that's going to be a huge, we have to negotiate some with the state. The state gave us that property in 2001, but it's still encumbered with state right-of-ways. We also would have to petition a DNR for the submerged lands to build out. And so there's also going to be permitting requirements. So, and I also know this is one of those, it's going to be a hot topic for folks in North Douglas. Some will love it, some will hate it, but long story to say, Docks and Harbors Board staff likes that project. We don't really have the funds to pursue any type of permitting, but if the board gave direction from the assembly, hey, that we want this done, we would move as quickly as we can. Mayor, I can go on with other projects if you want to hear more, or those are the two I know that you wanted.
Is there any other projects anybody would like to hear about? Mr. Smith.
Util, is the current plan to have more commercial operations in North Douglas, or is that far out and yet to be determined?
Mr. Util.
Mr. Smith, the chair, so the issue, what I would really like to see is a year-round launch ramp where we don't pull the ramp. We think we can build that. Funding is going to be an issue, and the potential for relieving some of the whale watching could be moved to the North Douglas, so that then now that we don't have as many whale watching going through Ock Bay and affecting residential users, residential homes in Ock Bay. So there's benefits to adding that to our portfolio. So, but I don't know if that would also allow us to use head tax to build that out. So that's a potential, but really the primary issue would be, or the primary need would be for local non-commercial use, but we may need to think strategically with for a commercial use, which will allow head tax. Additionally, in the assembly, this assembly passed a resolution earlier this year through the Alaska Association of Harbor Masters and Port Administrators. I have advanced a recommendation to raise the maximum amount from that DOT municipal harbor grant from 5 to 7.5. And part of that was thinking, oh, maybe someday we will need that more money for development in North Douglas. Similarly, maybe this is a good opportunity for the Statter Breakwater, which I think a lot of people have. If I may, I'll just go into that real quick. Statter Breakwater. So the Statter Breakwater, 40 years old, long in the tooth. It kind of confines our ability to develop more of Statter Harbor, as well as it's important for Andrews Marina, Fisherman's Bend, as well as we now with the ownership of the Ock Bay Marine Station, we would like to support other government vessels in that location. But the breakwaters are they're a federal asset that is run by the Army Corps of Engineers. They're responsible for breakwaters, groins, and jetties. We have petitioned the Army Corps for several years to get a study going for it. This past year, or currently in the Senate budget, Senator Murkowski's put forward money for the study, $500,000 as a CDS, formerly known as an earmark. So that is moving forward. We've had conversations with the Army Corps, Alaska District, and Anchorage just as last week. They say it's a great project. They're looking forward to doing that. The money is there, and we need $3.6 million. Half of it is local share, so Docks and Harbors share is 1.8 of that study, and then we're almost certain that it'll pencil out in the Army Corps' eyes, and then we'll have to come up with 20% of the replacement of the breakwater, which will be upwards of $50 to $75 million. So that would be another 20% of that, $10 to $20 million of local money that we'll need.
Ms. Hart.
Great, thank you. And thanks for that question. I think that the two projects here that Carl shared, the North Douglas and the Statter Harbor, both the breakwater and also just the pressure of whale watching in Statter Harbor. We've had a lot of communication from fishermen who are just really struggling with that too. So it's impacting not only the recreational users, but commercial fishermen are feeling it. People who live out in Fritz Cove feel that pressure. I'm curious, I love all of our earlier conversation and this idea of really trying to improve our communications. Thinking about those two issues, so North Douglas and things at Statter Harbor, how does the Assembly want to engage? We are going, those will be topics on every one of our agendas probably from now for the next couple of years. How would you all like to be involved? Do you guys, yeah, I'll just open question.
Ms. Wall.
I do think North Douglas would benefit from some conversation amongst the body, because I think it's one that I think a lot of people hear from a lot of people that would love investment in that area. And we're dealing with a lot of concerns about traffic and commercial use out there. And so that might be a good thing that the body can get more information on whenever the right time in the process is, so that you all don't get too far down the road and then we say, oh, there's too much traffic, we can't support it. I think it's a perfect example of where tourism issues and your responsibilities kind of overlap.
Ms. Hall.
I would say, thank you, Ms. Wall. I think that's really accurate. I would say that it worries me a little bit to think of North Douglas as solving part of the problem about whale watching, because part of the problem with whale watching is there's so many boats on the whales. So it's not just the traffic in the harbor, but it's how many boats are actually on the whales at any given time, especially at certain times. So that might be, and we've certainly seen presentations about that, and it might be an area nobody quite knows what to do. A lot of people, including the operators themselves, know that there's a problem and something needs to be done, but it's not an easy solution. So I think that it would be a really good one to have Docks and Harbors involved in as well. Thank you for raising that question, Ms. Hart.
Madam Mayor.
Ironically, I was just made a note to give to Mr. Etheridge about Statter Harbor and whale watchers. So at the end of it says, please work with Ms. Pierce as needed. So I'll give that to him. I think this is a perfect example of where you guys are going to be great. What would be helpful for us, I'll be honest, we don't look at your agendas very often, but if you know this is coming up, if you just shoot an email to the clerk is probably the easiest, and she can send something out and just says, hey, Docks and Harbors is going to be talking about this, and then you probably will not get the full body, but you probably get a couple of us there. So.
Thank you. Mr. Ridgway.
Thank you, Chair Etheridge and Madam Mayor. Yeah, that's why at the very beginning of it, when you said, hey, we don't want to have anything to do with harbors, like, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. We have 478 something boat trips a week, or I can't remember what it is at a Statter, but it's immense, and there's a lot of buses going there, and so that's the kind of people that are coming to you and asking for change. We start moving it out to North Douglas. Obviously, from a Docks and Harbors perspective, we've got a lot of pressure. Hey, do something about North Douglas, right? And so we're going to pursue that. Again, I would look for the Title 85 changes are very specific to docks, and it's really not docks. It's kind of a broader thing. So maybe kind of take another look at that in terms of how you want us to come back and say, hey, we got an issue based on communications with you we know is important. And I think we can do that pretty easily with more of this. So, thank you.
Ms. Hale.
Mr. Ridgway, you took the words right out of my mouth, which is, this is a tourism policy issue. This is exactly the kinds of issues we're talking about, because we're talking about using head tax and the North Douglas and And whale watching is something that has come to the assembly. So that issue has come to us. So that's perfect. Thank you.
The thing with this is it's still a long ways off. We don't have any money at this point for that project. And we're just kind of throwing ideas around and trying to figure out where we're at and what we can look at and where to look for funding and so forth. So we're quite a ways off. The main push for North Douglas is going to be for the launch ramp use for the locals. That's our main push for out there. And if something comes up that we want to look at the other part, then we could do that. But the main push is going to be the launch ramp portion of this project. That's been what the Docks and Harbors Board has been talking about now for several years on that project. But we still have the problem, we don't have the money to do it at this point, so. I think that should end that one, Madam Mayor. So, then, pardon?
Your annual report.
Our annual report. I know you've all gotten the annual report. We did better than we expected this year on all fronts, and as far as for the total income, we do have a little bit of money that we're going to be able to put in the bank to build up our reserve funds so that we can look at some of these projects we're talking about in the future. So, and then we had our fee increases, which we've heard about quite a bit, and that, but the on the different income that we've had and expenses and so forth on these, you've seen those in your finance committee. So if there's no questions on that, we can move on forward from that, because I know you've seen all of these numbers in your finance committee stuff. So if there's anything else, there's the new rates are on the back pages of it and of what's going to happen for this coming year, and then we're going to move up from there. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them. If not, we run over a little bit. So,
any questions on the annual report? Thank you for preparing that, Mr. Is there any public participation? Oh, excuse me, Ms. Hughes Candies.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to congratulate way back when I was the liaison. Exciting to see the rescue ladders and some of those safety things going forward. I know that was a long time effort, and happy to see that in our harbors.
Yeah. Actually, before I get to public participation, we have one little tiny item, and he just doesn't even know I'm going to talk about it today, but at some point we need to have Mr. Ridgway come and present to the body on the submarine. And if you don't know anything about that, you should ask Mr. Ridgway about that, because it's a jewel and we shouldn't give it up. And Mr. Yucatel, you're going to find a spot for it sooner or later. Anyway, is there any public participation on non-agenda items? See, none, but we're very happy that we actually have public here today. So with that, anything before the body? Else before Mr. Etheridge?
I'd like to thank the Assembly for taking the time tonight to meet with us and have this discussion. I think it's made a major difference in our communications, and I'd like to thank you all for making it happen, and hope we can continue to do it. Thank you.
Quite appalled at how long it's been since we've had a meeting with you, so truly apologize for that. Anyway, with that, seeing nothing further, we are adjourned. The Assembly, how much do you want to give them, Mrs. Hale?
Let's start back at 7:30.
Start at 7:30 at the cow.